So you know what? I actually made a couple of videos talking about the soul plan, and normally I would mention your book, and people say, why would I choose all the challenges in my life? So can you explain to us why we actually decide to have challenges or challenging lifetimes or accidents or all the drama we face?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This is something that we could spend hours talking about, and it took me 3 books to answer that question. But just to quickly sum up, there are 2 tracks on which we can approach this. One is analytic, and the other is more of the heart. So there are 5 analytic reasons I found for planning big challenges. They are balancing and releasing karma, healing, which refers to healing unhealed energies from past lives that are brought into the body for the purpose of healing in the current lifetime. The 3rd reason is service to others. The 4th is experiencing contrast, which means experiencing not love, so to speak. And the reason souls want to do that is because through the experience of not love, you come to understand what unconditional love really and truly is. My understanding is that anybody who's coming into body on planet Earth, regardless of what they've planned or not planned, that's their primary intention. The Earth experience is so intense, even in a lifetime that doesn't have that many big challenges, that it has the effect of accelerating the soul's evolution. So those who are very much committed to their evolutionary path, they often choose to come to the Earth School because the intense experiences make progress possible at a rate that is often not possible elsewhere.
Welcome everyone. So today we have an interview with Robert Schwartz, who is an author of 3 books on spirituality. And one of these books is called Your Soul's Plan. And this is one of the more influential books in my life. On my spiritual journey, I discovered his work maybe around 2016 or 17, not sure. But his work and his books talk about pre-birth planning and soul's plan. So soul's plan is basically this concept that before we incarnate into physical body, we plan significant amount of events in our lives. Who we want to become, what kind of people we're gonna meet. Very often we meet the same people over and over, like our twin flame relationships, for example. So Robert is almost like this kind of scientific researcher into past lives, karma, and soul's plan, because he worked with a group of psychics and they would do a research on countless case studies where actually many people learned, for example, why specific events happen in their lives. Sometimes even accidents or very important things like that. So this is an amazing interview in my view, and I really wanted to talk to Robert for a very long time. So if you are someone who is really serious into spirituality, metaphysics, esoteric concepts, I'm sure you will find this interview fascinating. Now, I want to say one very important thing before I'm gonna get into the interview. So what's happening currently with my brand, Truth Theory. So truththeory.com, my website, has been publishing content for over 13 years. We published thousands of articles, videos, podcasts, and reached millions of people. Unfortunately, my company is currently in a very bad situation because all those years of censorship, and this is something I normally don't talk about, forced us into a situation where the company might actually shut down soon. And what it means is that I might actually go through a bankruptcy, and my assets, meaning this channel, the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, website, domain, all these different things I've been building for many years, might be seized by the bank. Company is going through a lot of trouble at the moment, and I explained what's happened in the video that you can watch on truththeory.com/support. So go to truththeory.com/support, watch the summary of what's been going on behind the scenes, because I made a whole video about it. And support the campaign if you can, because this is pretty serious and I love to make content. I want to be doing similar interviews like the one today. I still gonna continue doing the videos and interviews for at least a couple of weeks more, because at the moment we are negotiating with the bank. I just had a little bit of extension where I can reduce the monthly payments, things like that. But I'm not gonna go so much into details here. I will be making more updates on the campaign page. So go to truetheory.com/support, watch the video and support the campaign if you can, or at least share it, because this is very important for my work and for my ability to be able to create free content as I'm doing normally. So enough said. Now enjoy the interview with Robert Schwartz. Mike Sigla from truetheory.com, and this is True Theory Podcast, and my guest today is Robert Schwartz, who is an author of 3 books. His work focuses on spirituality, particularly regarding reincarnation and the soul's journey. His most notable book is Your Soul's Plan: Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born. In this book, Robert explores the concepts that we plan our life circumstances before we are born, including challenges and hardships, as opportunities for spiritual growth and learning. So, Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Robert. So I came across this particular book, Your Soul's Plan, a couple of years ago, perhaps 2016, I'm not sure, but it was really profound work on my journey, because I was a guy who always explored this idea of karma, for example, and reincarnation. And I always had this idea of karma, that whenever something negative happens in our lives, this is probably a karma, or maybe, I don't know, sometimes it might be, let's say, I don't know, if you are careless, you might end up in a bad scenario, or the other option is it could be karma. And then in your book, you talk about a completely different reason for the fact that some people have accidents, because sometimes they plan these things, right? So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about your story and how you became interested in these topics and how your work started. And maybe you could give us a little summary.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I've now written 3 books about how we plan our lives, and in particular, how we plan our challenges before we're born. The one you mentioned, Your Soul's Plan, which is the first in the series, and then Your Soul's Gift and Your Soul's Love. Your Soul's Love is specifically about the pre-birth planning of challenges in romantic relationships. And what I do in the books is that I go through pretty much all the major challenges we face here in the Earth School, and one by one, I assess why a particular soul, an individual, planned that experience before he or she was born. And the way I accessed people's pre-birth plans, by working with mediums and channels, and through the form of hypnosis I practice, which is called a between-life soul regression, or BLSR for short. So in a BLSR, you can speak directly with what is called your Council of Elders. Excuse me. These are the very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who oversee your personal evolution. And you can ask your council any question about your life. Why did you plan a certain relationship, a certain experience? What does it mean? How do you respond to it? And if it's for your highest good to know the answer, which it almost always is, the council will tell you. So the way I came to do this...
I have a question, sorry to cut you off. So the Council of Elders is basically your spirit guides, like a group of spirit guides? Or this
is different than spirit guides. Spirit guides are non-physical beings who are very much involved in the day-to-day aspects of your lives. they'll get involved in the nitty-gritty when it's to your benefit. The Council of Elders, and everybody has their own, these are very, very highly evolved beings, actually far beyond the level of spirit guides, really so highly evolved it's actually beyond human comprehension. And they are responsible for overseeing your evolutionary path. So they know literally everything about you, every past life you've had on Earth, every past life you've had anywhere else, every non-physical lifetime you've had. They know what your plans are in detail for the current lifetime, what you chose to experience and why, what are the lessons you're working on, the karmic tracks that you put into place, so to speak. When people get to their Council of Elders, two comments I hear very frequently. They will talk about how they feel this overwhelming unconditional love that the council has for them. And they also comment on the total non-judgment of the council members. So people will often say things like, I could tell that my council knew literally everything about me, including all the bad things I've done in this lifetime, and yet they loved me unconditionally anyway. And, you know, for the average person, that experience of true unconditional love, that's the first time they felt that since they came into body in many cases. So it's really a homecoming of sorts.
And do everyone have their own council of elders, or is it just a one group for every person?
Everybody has their own council. There are different beings on the different councils. Now, there are some beings who are on more than one council. For example, I've had a number of clients who did a private between life soul regression and had Jesus as one of the members of their council. Saint Germain has shown up more than once. The ascended masters are on multiple councils. And then there are a number of other beings who we simply aren't familiar with, but all very, very highly evolved.
What do you think about, can something like that be hijacked by some negative entity that might pretend to be a member of your council, and they might try to trick you with false information, for example?
Well, this is why before we start a group online regression or a private regression, I always say a prayer, and part of the prayer is asking for protection from the highest sources in the universe. So I have really not seen interference by negatively intentioned beings. What does come up occasionally is that there's interference from the ego mind of the client. So the ego doesn't like it when somebody does a between lives regression, because what your ego really wants is to keep you in a state of fear and lack and limitation. And if you're in that state, if you really believe that you have reason to be afraid, or that you are limited or lacking in any way, then you're inclined to think that you need the ego to protect you. And that is very much what the ego wants. This is all explained very clearly in A Course in Miracles, which I'm sure much of your audience knows about. So occasionally the egoic portion of a client's mind will create some sort of interference, which is pretty easy to spot because it's fear-based, it's negative in some way. What people get from their guides and from their council of elders is always positive, uplifting, and unconditionally loving.
So, you know what? I actually made a couple of videos talking about the soul plan, and normally I would mention your book, and people say, why would I choose all the challenges in my life? So can you explain to us why we actually decide to have challenges or challenging lifetimes or accidents or all the drama we face?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This is something that we could spend hours talking about, and it took me 3 books to answer that question. But just to quickly sum up, there are 2 tracks on which we can approach this. One is analytic, and the other is more of the heart. So there are 5 analytic reasons I found for planning big challenges. They are balancing and releasing karma, healing, which refers to healing unhealed energies from past lives that are brought into the body for the purpose of healing in the current lifetime. The 3rd reason is service to others. The 4th is experiencing contrast, which means experiencing not love, so to speak. And the reason souls want to do that is because through the experience of not love, you come to understand what unconditional love really and truly is. And the 5th reason really is a subset of number 2, healing, but it's so important I break it out as a separate item of its own, and that is healing or correcting false false feelings or false beliefs about oneself. Those sorts of false beliefs or feelings feel discordant to the soul, and the soul would like the personality to heal or release them. So those 5 reasons have come up again and again and again in the research I did into people's pre-birth plans. Now, we could spend hours going over those. And at the end of that multi-hour period, you might say something to me like, well, Rob, I can see now why some souls would plan some challenges, mild challenges, moderate challenges, but I still can't wrap my mind around the idea that a soul would plan, for example, to be a parent who loses a child. The agony from that is so excruciating, I just can't wrap my mind around it. And if you phrased it that way, you would actually be completely correct. The mind cannot comprehend that kind of decision. You know, the ego mind, when it makes a decision, it does a cost-benefit analysis. What will I get out of this? What will it cost me? Will it be worth it? That is not primarily how pre-birth planning is done. When you're back on the other side, the mind is not your operating system, the heart is. And the heart wants one thing and one thing only, and that is to give and receive love fully and freely. So let's say that you're back on the other side, and another member of your soul group, who you know well, who you've worked with in many past lives, and there's a lot of trust and mutual love established. This member of your soul group comes to you and says, I'm planning a short lifetime on earth for this reason and that reason. Would you agree to be the mother or the father who shepherds me through this very brief incarnation? Now, if the heart is your operating system, and I assure you it is, then most likely your response is an immediate yes. Yes, I love you dearly, and if this is what you want and need from me, then my answer is yes. And then your attitude would be, assuming the child dies at a young age, I will work with my child's death to foster my own growth. That's the primary basis on which those kinds of decisions are made.
Yeah, I mean, I think same way like when you wake up from a nightmare, you think about it differently, right? Than when you are in the nightmare. When you are out of your body, you think about negative experiences differently, right? As well, because when you don't have that full knowledge, you react differently. Would you agree?
I think that's a good analogy. The main point here, I think, is that our perspective when we're home on the other side in the non-physical is very different than our perspective when we're here in body. Apart from the heart being the operating system rather than the ego mind, there are 3 main differences in perspective. One is when you're back on the other side, you know that a lifetime is actually very brief. Now, it certainly might not feel that way when you're here, especially if you're suffering. But from the non-physical vantage point, you know that it's actually very brief. Second, you know that nobody is permanently harmed by anything that happens here. And third, you're acutely aware of the fact that the wisdom that comes out of the incarnation will become part of you literally for all eternity. So from that vantage point, that a lifetime is brief, nobody is permanently harmed, the wisdom will be with you for all eternity. From that perspective, it actually does make sense that some souls, not all, but some, would plan very great challenges.
Could you give us an example of a case study where there was a massive challenge, and what was the growing opportunity from that challenge? Why this soul picked that challenge?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In my first book, Your Soul's Plan, and by the way, people can read large portions of the 3 books for free at yoursoulsplan.com. In Your Soul's Plan, there's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of accidents. And one of the 2 stories in that chapter is about an American woman named Christina, who is now in her 60s. She shared with me the following true story that started when she was in her 20s. When she was in her 20s, she was employed as an administrative assistant at a college in California. And one of her daily duties in that job was to pick up her boss's mail. The mailboxes were in the basement of the building in which Christina worked. So one day she descended the stairs to these basement mailboxes, just as she had done many, many times before. But on this particular day, unbeknownst to her, somebody had planted a pipe bomb in her boss's mailbox. When she inserted her hand to retrieve the mail, the pipe bomb exploded. And the force from this explosion was so great, it actually picked her up off the ground and threw her 10 feet backwards against a concrete wall. There were 6-foot splinters of wood that were shot like arrows out of a bow into the wall around her. 2 fingers were severed, both eardrums were ruptured, and flames from the explosion scorched her body from head to toe. When she got to the hospital, doctors actually had to hold magnets over her eyeballs to extract the shrapnel from the pipe. So we're talking here about a level of suffering that's almost unimaginable to you and me. Now, Christina's recovery took 2 years and 10 reconstructive surgeries. At one point during that 2-year period, she was lying in her hospital bed in a tremendous amount of pain when all of a sudden she heard a voice inside her head, a voice that was not her own. It turns out that the force from this explosion, in addition to doing a lot of damage to her body, it opened up her psychic gift. She had become clairaudient. And the voice she heard inside her head that day was one of her spirit guides. The guide said to her, "You planned this." And of course, she said, "Why?" And then the guide told her, and here's what he said. He said, "You wanted, before you were born, to have a lifetime as a gifted healer. And you knew pre-birth that if you could heal yourself from the devastating effects of this bomb explosion, you could then take all of that wisdom and knowledge about healing and turn it outward in service to others." Well, this is exactly what she went on to do. After she recovered from the 10 surgeries, she went back to school. She got a PhD in speech-language pathology, set up a private clinical practice, and at this point has healed literally thousands of people. She actually has the ability to go into a patient's brain energetically, meaning non-invasively, and restore language processing capability in people who have lost that due to stroke or accident. Now, when I spoke with her for the book, she said 2 extraordinary things to me. The first was, she said, "Rob, I have completely forgiven the person who planted that bomb." Now remember, this is somebody who had magnets held above her eyeballs in the hospital. And yet here she is saying in complete sincerity that she forgave the person who inflicted that kind of pain on her. But then she said something even more amazing. She said, "Rob, I am deeply grateful to the person who planted that bomb." And she really and truly means that. This, to me, is one of the most dramatic examples I've seen that shows what you can do with an understanding of your pre-birth plan. You can easily imagine she could have chosen instead to be angry for the rest of her life. She could have chosen to be bitter and resentful for the rest of her life. She might even have chosen to spend the rest of her life tracking down the bomber and taking revenge. But because she came into this awareness of her pre-birth plan and really worked with it over a period of years, it didn't happen overnight, she got to a place of forgiveness and then to a place of total gratitude. That is life-changing. And she might not have ever gotten to that place without an understanding of a pre-birth plan.
Yeah, this actually reminds me of another story from Joe Dispenza's book, Becoming Supernatural. Someone who became his assistant, this woman actually went through a horrific situation where her husband committed suicide. He left her with children. It turned out that he was in debt. And then over the next 3-4 years, she got so ill from all the grief and suffering that she destroyed her health. And then through the process of some of these meditations and techniques of Joe Dispenza, over the next couple of years, she recovered completely. And she started teaching others how to go through the same process. So later on, she said something similar, that actually the situation that almost destroyed her life completely was the biggest gift, because now she understood how to overcome that situation, heal herself, and she started teaching others how to do it. So I feel like, you can always understand how to help someone if you went through it yourself, right? This is why we choose these types of situations very often, right?
That's true, and these are high-risk life plans because, it could be that Christina would choose to be angry and bitter. It could be that the woman that you're talking about would choose to continue grieving or possibly being angry with her husband for the rest of her life. So when these plans are put in place, at the soul level, it's not known what the outcome is going to be. The soul hopes that the personality will do what Christina did or do what the woman that you shared the story about did. But it's possible that they may not succeed in fulfilling those plans. Now, if that happens, there's no judgment on the part of the Council of Elders. There's no judgment on the part of the soul. The only reaction on the soul's part will be a feeling of incompletion. The soul will feel we did not complete what we set out to do, so let's complete it in another lifetime or lifetimes. But there's no judgment at all.
Yes. So, do you think that sometimes my understanding is that if we want to evolve as a soul and reach the level, let's say, of higher self, one of the aspects is that you need to become more loving and gain more wisdom, right? And you gain wisdom through experiences of overcoming challenges. Same like, I don't know, you want to become fit, you have to go through the pain of weightlifting and things like that, something that has resistance, right? So do you think that many souls that want to speed up the evolution and gain wisdom and experience choose these types of challenging lifetimes?
My understanding is that anybody who's coming into body on planet Earth, regardless of what they've planned or not planned, that's their primary intention. The Earth experience is so intense, even in a lifetime that doesn't have that many big challenges, that it has the effect of accelerating the soul's evolution. So those who are very much committed to their evolutionary path, they often choose to come to the Earth School because the intense experiences make progress possible at a rate that is often not possible elsewhere.
As far as I remember from your book, that was years ago, but I think you said something that on average, something like 70% of important events are pre-planned. What's kind of the idea?
So in the channeling sessions we did when I researched people's pre-birth plans, I often asked Spirit, and we were talking to guides, angels, ascended masters, people's higher selves. I often asked what percentage of the time is this challenge, whatever it might be, planned before birth? And there was some variability in the answers to those questions, but on average it was around 70%. So that tells us that the vast majority of what we experience here is planned, but there's also a significant 30% that is unforeseen, and it occurs as the result of people's free will decisions once they get into body. The other thing I'd like to say about pre-birth plans, it's not the case that people have just one pre-birth plan. Everybody has many. They vary according to vibration. So if you think of, for example, a stack of sheets of paper. In a stack of sheets of paper, every sheet represents a complete set of pre-birth plans. So you and I and everybody on the planet, we all have our own stack of sheets of paper. That's how many pre-birth plans everybody has. Now, the sheets at the top of the stack, those are the pre-birth plans in which most of the learning is done through love, peace, and joy, not so much through pain and suffering. The sheets at the bottom are the opposite. Most of the learning is through pain and suffering, not so much through love, peace, and joy. So what you want, what I want, what everybody wants is to move up in their personal stack of sheets of paper. The way you do that is by raising your vibration, your frequency. And there are many, many ways to raise your vibration, but the most simple rule I can give people is anytime you have to make any decision, big or small, ask yourself the following question. What would love, with a capital L, do now? Whatever the answer to that question is, do that. The more you can do that, the more consistently, the more often, the more you move up in your personal stack of sheets of paper. And that's how you end up creating the life that you dream about.
So basically, whenever you have any decisions, you ask yourself, if this decision is positive, it creates love, or the opposite, in something like that, right? Basically,
the way I phrase it to myself is, what would love with a capital L do now? In other words, when I say love with a capital L, I'm talking about source, God, spirit. What Jesus, for example, what would Jesus do? You often hear people say that. Love with a capital L is just another way of saying the same thing.
Okay. You said we often have many plans, but you mean for one particular life you have several different plans, or?
Right. For every lifetime, not just several, you have an entire stack of sheets of paper, and every single sheet is a complete set of pre-birth plans. Another way to think about it would be when you do your pre-birth planning, you pick the themes, the lessons that you want to work on. So those are the broad outlines of the lifetime. They put parameters around what can happen. You can't actually go beyond those self-imposed parameters, but the parameters are pretty broad, and within those broad parameters, you have total free will to make loving or unloving decisions. And most people make plenty of both loving and unloving decisions. So people are constantly going up and down dramatically in vibration, and that moves you up in your stack of sheets of paper, or it moves you down. This is a quantum physics explanation of how pre-birth planning works, and it's really beyond the comprehension of the human mind. But the important point to take home here is that you have many, many complete sets of pre-birth plans.
What about if the person wants to change polarity? So we can be either service to self or service to others, right?
That's right.
And let's say you go through a lifetime where suddenly you shift polarity and you continue evolution as a service to self being. Do you think someone would want to change polarity purposely, or it would be like an accident where, because they lost memory of what's going on here, maybe they got programmed, hijacked to become service to self, and this now is becoming an accident or something like that? What do you think about something like that? Do you think this would be planned? Because who would want to, go into the negative from the positive?
So service to self and service to others. This comes from the Law of One books, which are a collection of channeled material that basically lay out the cosmology, the structure of the universe. And the Law of One material says that you're either on a service to self path or a service to others path. The way people generally end up on the service to self path, as I see it in my work, a soul will plan before birth to have one or more very difficult experiences in the hope that they will become more loving, more patient, more kind, more caring, more compassionate, whatever it might be. It could be all of those. And it will be known that the personality may choose to respond in ways that are unloving, unkind, lacking in compassion, and so forth. Coming back to Christina as the example, she didn't have to respond as she did. She could have chosen to be angry for the rest of her life. She could have chosen to track down the bomber and try to take revenge. So it's foreseen that the personality might choose to go in that direction. And I think what happens sometimes, in some lifetimes, is that the personality does go in that direction. And usually it starts off in a relatively small way. So something quote unquote bad or challenging happens. The person responds to it in some way that's unloving in a small way. And it could be unloving toward others, toward self, or both. And then sometime later, another challenge of some kind happens, and they continue in that direction. They respond in a way that is unloving toward self, unloving toward others. And with each successive challenge, they move gradually more and more onto this service to self path. I think that's how that generally happens.
Yeah, I see. Like you might put a challenge that is a little bit too much for you, and you're gonna, from the physical body, you will react not as intended before with the plan, right? More or less.
Yeah, more or less. Free will is sacrosanct throughout the universe, and nobody from the level of source down to the level of your spirit guides, nobody is going to try to interfere with your free will. And that's what makes the Earth School a truly meaningful experience. If we didn't have free will, then the plans that we put in place before we're born, they would basically make us automatons. We would be nothing more than robots going through prescripted motions, and then our decisions would have no particular meaning. Our decisions are actually quite meaningful simply because we have free will.
Yeah, for me, I was also thinking a lot about why would we want to have plans if we have free will. But if you think about it, there are so many options, and very often things might not be compatible. And you have your own predispositions, gifts, and talents, and all these things that maybe evolve through time. So you have specific set of things that will work better than some other choices you will make. So it actually makes sense to have, like, maybe meet the right person who will accelerate something, or you want to come back and meet the same lover or whatever because you know each other well and things like that. It actually
Well,
makes
that's
sense.
very much how pre-birth planning works. One of the things that souls do before they incarnate, they will meet and have planning sessions with the other souls who are going to play important roles in their lives. And they'll rehearse certain ways to recognize each other because they know how important it is that they're going to meet here and they don't want to miss each other. So, for example, let's say that two souls plan to be husband and wife. When something is that important to the life plans, you want to make sure that you're going to recognize each other when you're here in a body. So they'll do things like the soul who's going to be the wife will say something like, when you first see me, I will be wearing a dress that looks like this, and it's black with pink polka dots, or whatever it might be. Something is planted in the subconscious memory at that point, so that when the man, the soul who's incarnating as the male, sees the woman in that particular dress, there's a subconscious recognition. This person is important to me. I'd like to go talk to her. Or sometimes they'll do something like, they'll say, I'm going to be carrying a certain kind of umbrella. It will be yellow with blue stripes. And then when the other soul sees the yellow and blue striped umbrella, there's that subconscious recognition. They strike up a conversation. Otherwise, they might not meet each other.
What about regions? I think you said something about specific regions like Poland, and I'm Polish, and
Okay.
Switzerland have, uh, a lot of star seeds or these more kind of advanced souls born or something.
I,
Do you think? Because I was always curious, why would I choose Poland? So many challenges here. I had to learn a second language and all these other things. So I was like, what's the reason behind it? I don't know.
by the way,
What do you think?
I just want to mention for members of your audience who are Polish, I work with a workshop producer in Poland, and we do one or two online workshops every year. The next one will be in June of this year. So you can actually do an entire between life soul regression in Polish, if that's something you want to do.
And it's
But in any
going
case,
to be in person?
no, it's online, but with Polish translation. So we actually did one just a couple of weeks ago, and the next one will be in June. These are all listed on the events page at yoursoulsplan.com. I'm sorry, I forgot the question that you asked. Oh, you asked
No,
why
it's just,
in Poland.
I mean, why in general, what's going on with choosing regions, for example, Because specific regions have characteristics, right? Like almost like an energy that will help to shape the person or attracts specific types of souls. What do you think?
There's a body of channeled literature called the Michael system. And Michael here is not a reference to Archangel Michael. Michael is a group consciousness, a collective that has channeled a lot of information about pre-birth plans relative to soul age. And one of the things Michael says is that souls will choose to be born in a geographic location on Earth that is somewhat dependent upon the age of the soul. The reason for that is that souls of different ages have different interests and they want to work on different things and learn different things. And you can learn certain things better in certain regions of the world. So Michael says, for example, that with the infant souls who simply haven't been on Earth very much, they're interested in exploring issues of physical survival. According to Michael, they choose to incarnate in a place like Africa that lends itself to that kind of exploration. Young souls, according to Michael, are interested in exploring power. They tend to incarnate in a place like the United States, which lends itself to that. Then you get to middle-aged souls, mature souls, old souls. Older souls, according to Michael, incarnate in certain regions of the U.S., the Pacific Northwest, and around certain cities that are considered New Agey, like Sedona, Arizona, and Asheville, North Carolina. They also tend to incarnate, if I remember correctly, in certain countries, of which Poland is one, and I believe Switzerland is another, and there are a few others that I'm not thinking of right now. But the idea here is that you can best learn certain lessons by incarnating into certain regions.
Yeah, okay, interesting. What was the name of the book?
It's not one book. The channel consciousness is called Michael. It's a group consciousness. And there are several different individuals around the world who channel Michael. If you just Google the Michael system in quotes, you would find these different people in different books.
Okay. What about the higher self? Do you get, does higher self appear in these sessions? What's going on here? And maybe you can very briefly summarize who is the higher self.
So the way I conceptualize it is that the soul, which to me is the same thing as the higher self, the soul is what you could call a spark of God, and the personality is a spark of the soul. So the soul or the higher self occasionally shows up in somebody's between lives soul regression. Not too often. It's almost always the council of elders. If you were to set a specific intention to speak with your higher self, that would make it much more likely that you would be able to do that in the between lives soul regression. But I think of the higher self as providing guidance and inspiration, much in the way that spirit guides do. When you get that internal feeling of rightness or wrongness about something, you just know that something is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. You don't know why, you don't have logical reasons, but you feel it quite intently, often in the gut. That's a communication from the higher self trying to guide you in a certain direction.
Okay. And I think I wanted to ask you is what about repaying karma or balancing karma? Do you think that we have to repay karma or balance karma, or can we evade it? Why people choose to do it, or they pick some aspects of karma to repay in particular lifetime? What's your view about this?
What I've seen in the research for my books is that karma is unbalanced energy, and each individual decides for themselves whether the energy is unbalanced. So I would not say you have to repay or balance karma, but generally people want to if they have that sense of it being unbalanced. So let me give a concrete example. Let's say that two souls had a past life together in which one was ill and the other was that person's caregiver. When those two souls transition back into spirit at the end of that lifetime and have the life review, as we all do, they'll see the caregiving relationship portrayed in that life review. When they see it, they may or may not feel complete with the caregiving relationship. If they feel complete with that kind of experience, then, as I understand it, there is no karma, and they will go on to plan something completely different. But if either or both feel incomplete with the caregiving experience, and they decide for themselves, then they will want to balance the energy, balance the experience. So the easiest, most direct way to do that would be to simply trade places. Most likely what would happen next, if they feel incomplete, is that the one who was ill will plan to be a caregiver in the next incarnation, and the one who is the caregiver will plan to have an illness and receive care in the next lifetime.
Okay. Do you think that also heavy karma or unbalanced karmic patterns can kind of put a weight on evolution? So someone needs to clear that in order to evolve higher or faster? Or do you think this is some kind of plays a role in how the soul evolves?
Well, balancing karma is one of the 5 main reasons why souls plan big challenges before they were born. So I see that again and again in the between life soul regressions, the private sessions, the online workshops. People will report after a group workshop, for example, that their counsel told them that they had planned in this lifetime to balance this karmic experience, that karmic experience. It's a major motivation. But again, the important thing to know here, as far as I know, nobody is forced in any way to balance karma. It's just that when you're back on the other side, reviewing your past incarnation, if you left something incomplete, you yourself will want to complete it. You will want to balance it.
What about, let's say someone like Nikola Tesla, for example, who comes here to do specific work and bring some new technologies. Do you think that he actually plans those specific technologies, like whatever, popularizing alternate current, or maybe some kind of, engine or whatever, he invents? Does he understand these technologies before incarnation and he tries to work on them even though they were not invented on Earth yet? Or do you think he just plans to maybe, like, more broadly bring some revolution technological, and then these technical aspects, what kind of technologies it will happen, once he is already...
It's more likely that he set out with a broad intention to make revolutionary scientific contributions. And then some different possibilities were probably discussed in his pre-birth planning, but those possibilities would have been left open, and they would be the result of his free will decisions once he gets here into body. Coming back to Christina, the woman who was blown up in the bomb explosion, I asked in the channeling session for her chapter what would have happened if the bomber had chosen not to plant the bomb. And the reply from Spirit was that there would have been some other major accident. And it might have been an automobile accident, it might have been something else. So she came in with this broad intention to have a severe accident so that she could go on to become a gifted healer. It didn't have to be a bomb explosion. It could have been a number of other things. It just turned out to be a bomb explosion.
What about the exit strategy? Do we plan that as well when we're gonna leave Earth? Do we have like several different options depending on like the timelines choices we make?
That's my understanding. There are several different exit points planned in the pre-birth planning sessions. And you would take an exit point, and this is a soul level decision, not really a personality decision. The soul would take an exit point under one of two sets of circumstances. Either the incarnate personality has done what they came to do and learned what they came to learn, in which case it's time to go home, or the soul concludes they will not be able to do what they came to do or learn what they came to learn, in which case the soul's attitude is that there's no point in wasting time and energy, bring the incarnation to an end, and let's pick up again in another lifetime.
There's also this claim, I think it was started by Dolores Cannon, but I'm not sure, that there are many souls or many humans that don't have souls. They're like these characters in the video game, part of the Matrix or whatever. What do you think about it?
I've heard references to that. I think the term is non-performing characters. I don't know whether or not such a thing exists. The only thing I can tell you is that I have never seen a single example of that in any between lives regression I've done. And between the individual sessions and the group workshops that we do online, the number of individuals who have done the between lives regression with me, it's several thousand at least. Out of that whole group, I've never seen a single person who reported being told about non-performing characters. It simply has never come up.
Yeah, but sometimes they claim that maybe they have a memory, but the memory is implanted or is like false, because they meant to act as everything. They have a history and everything. So I don't know, but I'm not saying I believe that. I'm hearing this from people, and I'm wondering about if this is a real concept or not.
Right. I have to think that if that actually existed somewhere out of all these between lives regressions, it would have come up somewhere. But I have never seen a single reference to it.
Well, one more question before we're going to wrap up. So, for example, sometimes I'm thinking about, I'm heavily dyslexic, and some people have different types of autism or dyslexia or some of the other challenges. And I it was a, on one hand, it gave me a lot of creative abilities because I can visualize things very well. On the other hand, I had a lot of issues with basic things like reading, writing, pronunciation. Do you think that this is people choose like to be autistic or dyslexic or some of the other similar things, or this has to do because sometimes I hear, sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say, go back to Ursul's plan and reread the chapter about having disabled children, because that's the story of a woman who has two autistic sons. One is quite severe, the other more mild, but both of them planned with her, before any of them were born, to have autism to varying degrees. Now, in this case, the motivation was to learn about the importance of truthful communication. They had a past life, the two sons had a past life together, in which they knew the truth and they deliberately distorted it for unloving reasons. And then they saw that in their life review and they said to themselves, we would like to learn about the value of truthful communication. The plan they then came up with was to have varying degrees of autism so that they could really appreciate what truthful communication is all about and how valuable it actually is. It was not some sort of punishment from the universe, and it was not even a self-punishment for the past life. It was simply a desire to learn about the importance of truthful communication, and they felt this was the way they wanted to do it.
Because another theory that I heard about it is that sometimes if the soul is highly advanced, let's say, and it normally occupies higher densities, it has problems to accommodate in third density body, and that's why the person might be autistic or dyslexic or something like that.
That's certainly possible. I haven't seen that in my work, but it sounds very plausible to me.
Because also you get these people who might be autistic, but on the other hand, they're like extremely intelligent with these savants who can calculate things in their minds or things like that. What do you think happens here?
I think those are most likely souls who simply wanted to have the experience of being a savant in some way. What I see in my work is that the soul wants to experience everything. So if you are a soul who has never had the experience of being a savant, that experience would be very appealing to you simply because you had never done it before.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Thank you. We're gonna finish because you gotta go. I know. Anything else you wanted to add before we're gonna finish?
I think that's the message I'd like to leave people with is, it's my understanding that Earth is literally the most difficult school in our universe, and that only the very most courageous of souls choose to come here. The fact that you're in a body on planet Earth automatically places you among the most courageous souls in the entire universe. So honor yourselves for having the great courage it takes to come here, and honor everybody else for also having that great courage as well.
Thank you
You're
that
welcome.
gives me a lot of strength now and courage. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So we're gonna share the links in the description so you can visit Rob's websites and see the books. And thank you so much for taking time today. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thank you for doing the podcast. You bring a lot of light into the world.
Thank you.